Yo, what's up, YouTube? This is your boy Alex. It's Saturday night, and I'm doing back to back YouTube videos. This one's going to be on my actual premiere YouTube channel, the very same one that I'm starting to run out of space at. That's why you saw me drop the first video on the other reserve channel that's supposed to be talking about clothes and fashion with self improvement. This one is for the women because I did say like about 8 hours ago that part one was for the men. I did one about movies that do where men play sports and they were made into movies where they were based on true stories. Well, this is the same one with women in it because I got to show some women some proper respect. Women did make their mark and make their history in television and film. Women have made their mark in news and broadcasting, especially sports broadcasting. And women have also made their mark in playing sports, and some of those stories got made into movies and television shows. Now, unfortunately, I was able to come up with only six names. So I apologize to black women, white women, Latino women, and Asian women that the video might come up too short. I apologize. Normally, my videos are usually between 10 to 15 minutes, 20 to 25 minutes maximum. Sometimes they go past 30, 35 minutes plus. So I apologize if the video come out too short. This was not done intentionally on purpose. I tried to find other movies that women have played sports that were based on true stories. I just can't think of any more at the time, and these six happen to be on my list. And this is a portray women in positive light. Is this not really talking about sex or dating? It may say sex game, but it's not talking about sex game. So before anyone gets critical or rush into the comment section and judge a book by its cover, please at least watch 10 to 15 minutes of the video before judging whether it's to give me good constructive criticism or bad criticism or a combination of both. So the title of this YouTube video is going to be called Sex Game, the top six sports in films by or for women. So we're gonna change the title up and call it "Sex Game: The Top Six Sports Movies Women Are in Films." So we'll probably put women in sports in films. We'll try to come up with a better name than the one I came off. All right, coming in at number six is a movie called A League of Their Own. Now this movie's about 25 to 30 years old. Now, this is a movie every man and woman should watch at least one or two times. Doesn't matter if you take your woman out to lunch or dinner, you should at least watch this movie. It's a movie like no other. It's like a movie of ahead of its time because it's like a drama, sports, and a comedy. And this movie's like at least 20 to 25 years old because it was like in the late 80s, early 1990s, and today is 2020. So you can tell that it was like at least 20 years old, if not 25. And this movie was about women playing baseball during the time of World War II or the Cold War, either World War II or the Cold War. And Tom Hanks is like one of the main characters in this movie. And all the men could not play basketball and football and baseball, so at that time they got drafted into the military and they were forced to go into the military. Because it happened in World War II and then it happened again with the Vietnam War, the Korean War. They had all these drafts, and every time we had a draft, a lot of the guys that were actors in television and film would be forced to go into the military and they were forced to be drafted, and it happened to our athletes of that era. That was like the golden age of sports at that time. It was like the golden age of filmmaking at that time. So a lot of the big Hollywood budget movies got postponed by 4 or 5 years because of the wars. Same thing with baseball, basketball, and football games. A lot of the best athletes were forced to go to fight in the wars. And the athletes that were in high school or in college, they were forced to come into the leagues a lot earlier than they was. So back in those days, you could imagine that a lot of guys' skills weren't developed like today's generation. And these women came at a period where they needed someone to play baseball, so a lot of the professional baseball teams would have a mixture of men and women playing baseball. They don't really talk about it too much in the history books, but it has actually happened. And in this movie, you have Rosie O'Donnell, you have Gina Gore Davis, you have Madonna in there, and you got an all-star cast. It's like a funny sports comedy because it is based on a true event, and it actually did actually happen. and they play, and in a way, women kind of saved baseball. They don't really want to give women the proper respect that they deserve, but in the way they actually did save our sports. Like if you know Marilyn Monroe actually saved 20th Century Fox in that same time period because, like I said, they went off the war and nobody was watching those movies. And here comes Marilyn Monroe around that same time period. And one group saved the sports, and the other one saved television and film. So it's no wonder why you look in today's culture that women should get more respect and more credit than they actually deserve. And I'm not just talking about because they're beautiful and they're attractive and we see them in the movies. I'm talking about as far as history is concerned. So this movie kind of is like a history piece with sports. And it has its funny moments, it has its serious moments, and we all like Tom Hanks' part in this movie because he says this one quote that everyone uses in all sports and in life: crying in baseball? Crying in baseball? There's no crying in baseball. And everybody seems to love that part in the movie because he had to teach these women how to play baseball professional wise. So you can kind of see how baseball has made so much history that it is an American sport, and it's just as a good competitive sport as football and basketball. Because it kind of set the tone and the run for later on when Jackie Robinson would come in and break the color barrier. So like there was that, and then you had women playing baseball during that pivotal wartime period. Coming in at number five is Blue Crush. Now this movie had Michelle Rodriguez in it. It supposedly is supposed to be about true events. It's stories like maybe 16, 17, 18 years old, took place in the mid 1990s, and it was about these women that was on the East Coast that were fascinated by this guy that did surfing, and one of the girls had a dream about being a surfer. And at that time, they were discriminating against women doing extreme sports. Like before we got the X Games. Like if you think about it, this movie's like a precursor to the X Games because before we got extreme sports, people were already doing extreme sports. Like to wide a 15, 20-foot wave knowing you could, die to your death is like, that's like, that's a lot to think about. And here's this woman who comes in and say, you know what, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And the movie was based on a true story because the girl did surfing, and guess what? Now when you go to the beaches, if you live here in California, you would go to Venice Beach, you will see men and women compete in tournaments of surfing. And I do find women who do surfing very physically, sexually attractive. I've seen a lot of white women surf. I've seen like maybe one or two black women surf. Doesn't matter if they're valley girls. I just think it's hot. And this movie kind of, again, it breaks a barrier in history that just because a man can play a sport don't mean a woman can. Women can play sports, men can play sports. So when the controversial argument comes up, should a woman play a man's sport, it depends on what sport we're talking about. Like if it's a sport that both genders can play, then that's okay. But this movie kind of again shows women in a positive light, and the movie was so very well received, very well good. It got greenlit for a sequel. It got a part two, a part three. It got like at least four films. Got a television show. At one point, I think they rebooted it because it was that good of a story to tell over for new audiences. So this movie is something that I highly recommend you watch. If you're into this type of stuff. All right, coming in at number four is The Next Karate Kid. Now, The Next Karate Kid had an actress by the name of Hilary Swank, which she's a veteran actress at this point, and she kind of broke into Hollywood in the late 1980s, early 1990s. She appeared in a lot of dramas, a lot of movies and television shows, and this was her big break in acting as an actress. And they decided to make a fourth Karate Kid movie. The first three Karate Kid movies were great, and then they made a fourth film. So before we got the Karate Kid with Jaden Smith in it, and before we got the television show that was a harken back to the original three films, we got the next Karate Kid, and they decided to make it a woman. And this was kind of interesting because you always wonder in those three films, when are we going to ever see, a female learn karate from Pat Morita? Mr. Miyagi, God rest his soul, rest in peace. And this movie was good because he showed her how to do martial arts. She competed in the karate tournaments, won championships, and she was in high school or in college. And this was a good time to make the movie work. Now, unfortunately, the movie kind of failed people's expectation because they wanted them to show the main character from the other three films, and it was trying to figure out why make a fourth film if it doesn't tie into the past, which it did. They told the story that the main character would go to war, and you look 20 years later, they bring up the television show, and a lot of people don't remember the fourth Karate Kid movie. A lot of people don't remember there was a girl who actually was in a movie called The Next Karate Kid. See, people remember the first three movies. They know Cobra Kai, and they did know they rebooted Karate Kid, and it didn't work. But difference between the next Karate Kid and that the Karate Kid reboot is that you still had original characters from the first three films in the fourth film. Just like when you watch Cobra Kai, you're seeing original characters. Where the reboot is all new characters. It's all a new story, new type of story. So that was the clear difference. All right, coming in number three is Girl Fight. This has Michelle Rodriguez in it. This one's kind of like a story of a girl who gets abused like for 10 years, and one day she decides to fight back her abuser, and she learns boxing at an academy where she becomes an amateur boxer, and then she ended up trying to go pro, and then she starts to have all these challenges. Her boyfriend's cheating on her. She's got family issues, people using her because they see her superstardom, and there's her struggle with right and wrong, and Michelle Rodriguez embodied that character. In fact, that's the movie that launched her career. Period. That movie made her into a household name. Before, nobody knew who Michelle Rodriguez was. We all know her from the Resident Evil films, the Fast and Furious films. We know the movies is in between. We know she did Machete 1 and 2. We know she did the multiple franchises. But when people, if you were to meet her in person, she would look and say, "What is one of my, if not my first film, what are one of the films to start my career?" You would probably have to say Girl Fight, because that movie is how she got into Fast and Furious. That's how she got into Resident Evil. That's how she got into the Machete movies. She did do a movie called Blood Rain. She did pop up in Blue Crush. So she appeared in other movies like Avatar. So we know the movies that she play in. But Girl Fight already portrayed her as, if you were going to do a Catwoman movie or a Black Widow movie at that time, she probably could have pulled it off because she was already doing these type of movies already before Fast and Furious. And you could kind of see why would a woman do boxing, but this movie was like in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and it's an underrated movie because it was very well written, produced, directed. It launched her career. We knew who she was. Like, if you didn't know anyone else from the story, you knew Michelle Rodriguez, with her sexy fine ass. Coming in at number two is Love and Basketball. I mean, you cannot forget Love and Basketball. If you make a list of women doing sports and film, you cannot forget Love and Basketball because it was written, produced, and directed by Spike Lee. Now, if you were going to get a black man and a black woman playing basketball and then the two fall in love, that's probably how a black man and a black woman would actually fall in love. It's Love and Basketball. I mean, the fact that you got a story of two people who are kids, they go to the same junior high, the same high school, they play basketball against each other in high school and college. Both of them go pro. They don't see each other for 10 years, and they still have strong, powerful feelings 10 years later. And then all of a sudden they fall in love. And Spike Lee kind of revisit basketball because a lot of people wanted to see a sequel or sequels to He Got Game, and he gave you something that's just as good as He Got Game. He gave you another story that involves basketball, but called it Love and Basketball because it always made you wonder. There's two things that black men like: basketball and black women. And this movie kind of showcased black men and black women in a strong, positive light, not in a negative light like most movies. In this movie, you weren't just seeing, basketball. You were seeing the struggle between black men and black women and how they coexist, good and bad. And at the end, you saw the end result. They were married and they had kids. And the fact that they made this movie, it worked. Like, people, when they first marketed, they told Spike Lee, "Man, this movie ain't gonna work, man. Ain't nobody gonna go see this." And Spike Lee said, "You sit back and you watch. I did He Got Game, and they saw that. I'm gonna do this. They're gonna see this too." And you had Tyra Banks in the movie. You brought in that guy that was from Waiting to Exhale. He was in the movie. You had Omar Epps in the movie. You had Shalay Nathan in this movie. When she started her career. They were bringing an all-star cast in this movie, and the movie was so good that again, you always wonder. Spike Lee could have. He could have came in. That was two stories about basketball, so he did give us a second story. So pretty much, this is why it's at the top of the list. This is why it's that high on the list, because it's Spike Lee. And this movie worked. And you fast forward 10, 15 years later, what do you got? Bunch of black men and black women playing each other in basketball because of why? A movie called Love and Basketball. So you see that, and you can see the impact that it has on us as African Americans, black men, black women playing basketball. It brings us together instead of us fighting over foolish nonsense. So you can thank Spike Lee for that. All right, coming in at number one, the number one movie of women in sports films, and that is a movie that it was written, produced, directed, and starred the legendary great Clint Eastwood. And that movie's called Million Dollar Baby. This is another movie that has Hilary Swank. Now, this movie right here is what made her into a bona fide actress. You can say an action star, but you can say critical acclaimed actress. This was her movie. This was her story. To take a girl who tried to do boxing in the mid 1990s or something like that, and basically this was the movie that if you were going to do the Rocky story all over again and say, okay, we seen a man do boxing, how come we ain't never seen a woman do boxing? The only movie at that time was Girl Fight. But Million Dollar Baby kind of solidified, yeah, women can come in the ring and whoop some ass too against another woman. And Hilary Swank transformed her body. Like, I didn't even recognize her when she did the movie. Like, I thought it was another actress. Because sometimes they bring in doubles. Your doubles might be too tall or too small, the same size as you. Sometimes they put the makeup on your face. Sometimes they digitally enhanced your face. And sometimes you look different and they can't tell it's you. And it was her. Like, she lost weight. She lost weight, did cardio, built some muscle. And she actually looked like the girl in real life. She got to, knocking people out with a left hook. I was like, oh shit. She was beating people in fights. She was winning fights. She was on the verge of winning a championship. And the fact that Clint Eastwood played like a Mickey type of character. Like, he played the Mickey character like we saw in the Rocky series. And then she played like a female version of Rocky. Someone that needed to be trained and mentored on this is a right hook, or this is a left hook, this is a right cross. Keep your hands up. Like he would always say, protect the house. And the movie worked because it got best picture, best sound, best director, best actress, best actor. Like, that year belonged to Clint Eastwood, okay? It belonged to him as a director, and the movie as an actress, it belonged to Hilary Swank because she would just get bigger as an actress. She would pop up in the movie called Black Dahlia. She would pop up in that. So her career just took off after that. And she became a whole house name after this movie. And Million Dollar Baby, even 10 or 15 years later, this movie still stands to the test of time. It's on the same level as the first Rocky film. Because if you watch Rocky, Rocky lost to Apollo Creed. This character loses to the champion. Both characters go to the hospital. Both characters could have had their boxing careers come to an end. So when you watch Million Dollar Baby, you are seeing the Rocky story all over again. You're seeing it with a woman. And the movie was so good, it's on the same level. I'm not saying it's better than Rocky, but it's on the same level as far as filmmaking is concerned. Because you see the natural elements in boxing. And when you see the natural elements in boxing, from this point on, I started watching women in boxing, period. Muhammad Ali's daughter, Layla Ali, was boxing. I started watching all her fights. Then all of a sudden we get to the mid 2000s, like 2002, 2003, 2004, and 5. And what do we get? A precursor. This movie kicked off a precursor of women doing mixed martial arts. Like, you start seeing women do mixed martial arts. Every time UFC come on ESPN, I'm always watching white and Latino women whoop ass in the octagon. And I find those women who do that very physically, sexually attractive. Some men like women doing mixed martial arts. Some men do not like women doing mixed martial arts. I am one of those guys that have an open mind and say it's okay to explore and see something new, see something different. And they have their own division, they have their own championship belts, and the women perform, and I watch the fights. Don't matter who it is. Like when we watch Holly Holmes versus Ronda Rousey. You look at this boxing movie, and guess what? There are some fights in this movie there are fights that remind you of this movie, and there's this movie that remind you of those fights. And clearly, you could see Hilary Swank as one of those fighters. You could see her as a Ronda Rousey. You could see her as a Holly Holmes. I'm just trying to tell you that this movie right here, from that point on, I started watching women box. I started watching women do mixed martial arts. And when women do martial arts, I have respect for women who do martial arts. So it doesn't matter if you're a black woman, a white woman, a Latino woman, or an Asian woman, you do martial arts or boxing, I've got some respect for you. So this movie portrayed women in a positive light. Like this was the first time I don't think nobody had a problem with a female lead in a movie like this. And if Clint Eastwood wanted to, there could have been a sequel. Like there could have been a $1 million Baby Part 2 or Part 3 if he wanted to go that Rocky route. One film was good. One film was enough. Like that's it. You don't need to do 2 or 3 films. You treat this movie like Terminator. Just 1 or 2 films. You ain't got to make a 3 or 4 and a 5. I'm pretty sure somewhere down the line in the future they will probably come back and revisit it and probably make it about someone else's story. So this video, I apologize to the women that this short's 21 minutes. I did try my best with this video. Until next time, peace.